Man, oh man, what an episode of Overlord. Now, to kind of quickly just clarify, the army that Enri has under her command, Honorary General Enri, or the Bloody General Enri, the army that she has underneath her after this episode is actually in the top 3 greatest armies on the continent, apparently, from what has been revealed. Now, this isn't any spoilers, this was actually stated when this was revealed in the light novel. When we first really got to see this army, it was stated that her army, this new 5,000 men goblin army, is literally top 3 strong, and that's ridiculous. Yes, that is even factoring in Ainz' group as well. So Nazarick would be number 1, the Empire and its army would be number 2, and then you would have the 3rd with the Goblin army, which Enri now commands. So when you really put all the pieces together, you realize that Ainz has the strongest force in existence under his command, which is Nazarick, and then he also has the other strongest force that's in the top 3, that is Enri's Goblin army. So he has quite the army underneath his command. Many people he can use to, just invade different countries, take over different cities. He has a very strong force. Now, to kind of put into perspective on how strong this army is, and why Ainz himself was even freaking out while watching the army pop up, the red cap goblins that you see, that there's only 13 of them. It was stated there was only 13, but the red cap goblins, they are in fact stronger than the Death Knights. Yes, the legendary undead Death Knights. According to the New World, everybody in the New World, as I've said already many times, one Death Knight can wipe out cities and a country. That's how strong a Death Knight is compared to regular folk. And so when you have something like red cap goblins, 13 in total, underneath a regular human girl, that these red cap goblins are actually stronger than a Death Knight, that just will blow your mind. And this is the best way to put it. The prince that tried to attack the village and take down the goblins, it's kind of like he was playing D&D, and he rolled a 0 in luck. Like, this man straight up had the worst possible roll you can get while playing, like, Dungeons & Dragons, because he literally encountered a force that, in a lot of ways, is stronger than the force that Ainz is going to be sending. I mean, yes, granted, Ainz has a lot of Death Knights. He's supposed to have Soul Eaters, which I didn't actually cover in my last, episode review of Overlord, which, forgive me on that. But, even though we only see Death Knights in the army, and they're not really wanting to probably animate Soul Eaters, point is that Ainz does have more, quantity. He has a quantity of soldiers when it comes to Death Knights, and even though they are technically weaker than the Red Caps most likely would be overwhelmed by the Death Knights if it was in a straight fight with Ainz' Death Knight army versus, 13 Red Caps. That's just how it'll be. They'll just run out of energy, stamina, mana, whatever, before they probably could actually take down the Death Knights, all of them. Still, though, if it was a Red Cap versus a Death Knight, Red Cap most likely would win depending on the situation if the Death Knight doesn't have a lot of bodies to resurrect and make soldiers. But if it's a straight up 1v1, most likely the Red Cap could potentially win against the Death Knight, because the Red Caps are around level 40s while the Death Knight is, level 35. So, yeah, that's kind of crazy. A 40 Goblin versus a 35 Death Knight. And that is a pretty massive leap in level, okay? In RPG standards, 5-level gap is pretty massive, okay? A 1-level gap can also kind of skew stats a little bit, especially if you get into PvP and, RPGs and stuff. So, 5-level gap, that's ridiculous, and it just shows that the Red Cap Goblins now underneath Enri's command is pretty freaking ridiculous. But okay, so anyways, let's kind of go over all the nitty-gritty of, Enri's army, what makes it so ridiculous, why Ainz is freaking out, besides just the Red Caps, obviously. So, when you look at the entirety of the force, it shows that it is comprised of a lot of different units. I mean, you have, the Shadow Ops, the Archer Squad, you have the Cavalry, you have the frontline soldiers, you have the mages and the casters, divine casters, you have tactician in the army, the main leader. So I mean, when you look at everything going on, the Goblin army that Enri has under her command has everything that is vital to lead an army. Now, you can notice that all the, Goblins, they're very organized. They're extremely organized, they're marching in a proper formation, and even though the formation is very simplistic, and even in the light novel it does explain that the formation was simplistic, it was done in a way for the troops troops can continuously use its momentum to push forward and get up to where the prince was. But regardless, though, the troops are very well organized, they listen to instructions, and they're very, very powerful. Because to kind of explain here, the first original goblin army, or goblin troops that Enri summoned, you know, like the couple of goblins she had, that's like under 10 goblins or whatever, the goblins, they are all around, like, maybe level 5, maybe around level 10. Like, the highest one would be the main leader, Jugum. I can't pronounce his name properly, so forgive me. But he's, like, around a level 10. And even in this standards of New World, that's actually pretty high, okay? I mean, yes, it's not like a Death Knight or anything, or, you know, the Goblin Army like Red Caps, but it's still pretty high, because he's definitely a very strong soldier. That's how strong the first original leader of the Goblin Army was, that's been protecting Enri since the very beginning. But the regular soldiers that popped up with the shields and stuff and they were marching, those soldiers are around the leader goblin's level. Like, you know, the original leader goblin's level. So around the level 10 and stuff. So all of the warriors are nowhere below level 10. They're all really high up there. So the force, the army, is definitely something that could deal with most problems, especially if it uses all of its capabilities at once. Some of the actual, you know, goblins within the army actually could even give Gazif a problem, and potentially maybe even be able to defeat him if they really got together and started working against him. So yeah, the Goblin Army is by no means a joke. It is ridiculous. Now, to explain how it popped up, because Ainz himself, he really didn't even understand how it happened. And in the light novel, it was never outright stated how the Goblin Army was summoned. It's more left up to speculation, theory crafting on how it was done, and this kind of goes into the core theme of what was the original game of Overlord. See, to give some details here, before Ainz was actually in this world, the new world, and he was actually his real character, the undead Overlord, you know, he was just playing a game. And in the game, the creators, they made everything very mysterious. They made things to where, like, you didn't know anything about it. It's kind of like this. Let's say someone made a massive game, an MMORPG, like World of Warcraft, okay? Let's take example World of Warcraft. You know next to nothing about the items in game, the level system, anything. Like, everything is very vague. Nothing is stated at all. And so you would have to play the game to figure out hidden mechanics, things that, you know, are just not outright stated. So you would have to constantly try different things to unlock stuff. And that's how that game was made, the Ainz came from. It was made in a way to where items, certain items that drop from monsters, they'd be very vague, or you wouldn't really know what they can do, but they could have hidden effects that wasn't even stated in the item description. And that's what the Goblin Horn was. The Goblin Horn was able to summon an extra additional goblin army if certain requirements were met. Now, it was stated in the light novel that there was apparently 3 different requirements. Now, it was never really said what those were, like the exact detail, but many speculate it most likely has something to do with Enri's capabilities of commanding an army. Because of her being able to lead her small goblin force and the experience that she has gained of it, she has leveled up a little bit in her command skill, and so in turn, when she used the other, you know, Goblin Horn to summon the Goblin Army, it summoned another one in. That is speculation. It's not entirely confirmed with all the little details attached to it, and I'm not really going to get into all the different theories on that. But the point is that Enri did something that no one really knew about. No one from the original game that Ainz came from really knew about it. And if they did know about it, they didn't let anyone know, because that's how the game worked. People would find out things, and they would keep the information to themselves. They would have, like, their own little book, their details on certain things, and they would not give that information out to anyone, because information was very powerful in that world. So that is why, like, Ainz knows certain things, but he doesn't know other things about the world and how it works, because people were very greedy. They held on to things, and they didn't want anyone to really know how certain things worked. So yeah, that was the whole purpose of that, and showing how Ainz had no idea that a little item like that comes from like a random drop monster that's a really trash item could turn out to be so good. And yes, that is a trash item technically. The drop rate was kind of trash. It wasn't anything that was really good from what many people saw. Ainz has a lot of them actually, and it was like a throwaway item to him, and that's why he just gave it over to Enri like it was nothing. If he would have known that and the requirements for it, he might have actually kept it, because Ainz, as we know, he's a little bit greedy. He's a greedy man. He loves hoarding things. He loves magical items. He loves his money. So, because of all of that, you would assume that he probably wouldn't have given something up that powerful if he actually would have known about it in the first place. Now, it's kind of obvious that the prince was going to die. I think everybody knew going into this episode, if it wasn't Enri's group that did it, it was going to be Beta, or, Ein, someone was going to do something to the prince, because, no one's going to get away with attacking a city that is technically under Nazarick control. So, Beta, she finishes the man off, and if you notice at the end, she uses red-cap goblins to wipe the prince out and the regular nobles that are around him and the rest of the soldiers. And many might assume that those red-cap goblins might be something that was from Enri's group. Maybe Enri had her red-cap goblins chased down with Beta, and then they took down, the prince. That's what some might assume, but that is actually not the case at all. Those red cap goblins were actually like a contract that Beta made, and actually, when it comes to Nazarick, these type of contracts can be made left and right like it's nothing, as long as if they have the original gold from the game. And as we know, the gold really can't be made as easily anymore. They can't really get that back, which is one of the reasons why Ainz is a little bit of a penny pincher. He doesn't like spending a lot of gold for defenses and stuff, is because, he realizes there's not really a good means of getting it back. Yes, there is an exchange box. You can put items in it and get money back, exchange it into the original gold, but it's very ineffective, and it's not something that can really get back mass sums of money. So, yeah, but basically, the red cap goblins, it wasn't explained at all in the anime, but they were a contract that used the original gold from the game to create, and technically you can do this, use contracts to pretty much create any monster you want, as long as if you have the gold or whatever, of equal level into a monster in game. So, yeah, that means that basically, if Ainz really wanted to, and he wasn't a penny pincher, he could probably make creatures or whatever with contracts that might be able to scale up to maybe almost a floor guardian. So yeah, that's the scary part about this. So if Ainz really got serious and he was forced into a corner and he needed some really strong, warriors under his command, he could use the gold to create a lot of warriors under his command that's very high level. That is a monster. Yeah, puts in perspective a lot when you think about it. I guess let's also talk about how the village will run from this point forward. It wasn't really explained what is going to happen next, which obviously it ended in a way to where, just the prince died. But it was already kind of explained in the light novel when it happened, and I just don't really expect it to kind of, elaborate on it in the anime, because there is a lot of details that the anime does need to cut out because they just don't have enough time, and which sucks. I really wish they had more time to dive into all the details, but that's why I'm here to explain to all of you to kind of understand what, the anime did cut out. So, many might be wondering, with 5,000 soldiers now underneath, Enri's command, that's going to lead to a very serious problem. A problem that some might have realized, or some might not even thought about. The problem is food, storage. Where are they going to live in the first place? Because think about it. 5,000 goblins that are not going to disappear. If we're going by what we already know from the original Goblin Squad, that means they're not going to disappear. So, if 5,000 goblins are there to permanently stay, there is no way that little village is going to be housing all of those soldiers. They're all trained soldiers that can do many things. So, there's going to be a problem for living. There's going to be a food shortage, there's going to be a living shortage, no houses, and it's going to lead to a lot of problems. And in the light novel, it is explained that because of this, it is a big problem. Enri even mentions it, the goblins have to figure out a way to tackle it, and, the house that was made for the ogres, to the walls that were made, they were all in construction to be able to make a better town for the goblins. I mean, it was even mentioned in this episode they had people that were trying to immigrate into the town, and so they were constantly trying to figure out a way to expand upon the town and make it a lot larger for it can, be self-sufficient. And after this situation with the goblin army popping up, it actually is stated in the light novel that Enri has to send out, the cavalry squads and all the different goblins to, get food, to work the fields, create agriculture. A lot of things have to be done to make sure that, this town is living in a proper way. Now, I take a moment to say I really love Beta's voice acting. I really love how sadistic she was in that moment towards the prince. She's like, oh, I like that face. I'm like, I love it. I love Beta. She's such an amazing character. One of my personal favorites, honestly. And just seeing how she acted towards the prince and then what happened, I'm like, yeah, she's definitely one of my favorites. Voice actor nailed that scene personally for me, and I just, I really want more of her in the future. I can't wait to hear her voice actor once again. Now, okay, I made you wait long enough. Let's talk about the CGI. So, when it comes to Overlord, I don't really expect 10 out of 10 CGI. I've kind of looked over it for the most part. I mentioned it here and there, and I think anyone that's watched Overlord to this point of the series knows what to expect, that the CGI isn't anything that you can write home about, something that is amazing. And I have to admit, even though I can overlook a lot of CGI, the CGI in this episode was pretty garbo. It was really bad. I love the episode, don't get me wrong. Great episode, love it. But holy crap, the soldiers of Enri, when they were marching and the way they looked, it looked so horrifying. Like, when I was reading the light novel, and I was thinking of these images in my head, I never would have imagined I would see, like, blob monsters, like CGI monsters. I'm like, oh. But it was still enjoyable. I loved it. It was fun, but, yeah. The CGI was really atrocious this episode, and yeah, I really hope it's not that bad for the final part with the splats. I really hope not. But I want to end this video here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.